How can you tell if your partner or husband is actually a narcissist? What is the true way to spot a narcissist? Hi everyone, Mireille Nicole here. In today's video, I want to share with you maybe a bit of an unconventional view or a different opinion on narcissism and how to identify whether or not you're with a narcissist, you're in a narcissistic relationship, or most importantly, when it might look like he's a narcissist when in fact he is not. Let's just dive right into this one today. So a common practice is to diagnose a narcissist based on his behavior. So you're looking at what the man is doing, how he's acting, and based on that, you're determining whether or not he has narcissistic tendencies or has narcissistic personality disorder, or maybe he's a covert narcissist, if you can really dig deep and pinpoint those aspects or those characteristic or traits. The problem with this is it doesn't consider the dynamic in the relationship. And I've used the word dynamic in the relationship, that term, a lot recently. And maybe I should give an example that I had shared actually years ago. I haven't shared this analogy in a while. It's super simple, but it could help you kind of picture what I mean here. So a great way to think about the dynamic of a relationship or in your relationship is to think of it like a game of ping pong, right? So you have one player, which is maybe you, right, with your ping pong racket or whatever it's called. And then you have your partner, right, on the other side with his own ping pong thing. It's a racket. Is it a racket? That's a tennis racket. I don't know what it's called. And also in the relationship, there isn't just you two playing that game, right? There's the ping pong ball. And I want you to think of that ping pong ball as the dynamic in your relationship. So as you guys are in your marriage and your relationship, just being you guys as a couple, right? You guys are each hitting that ping pong ball to the other side, right? To one another. And sometimes you might hit the ping pong ball and it goes flying in the wrong direction. It doesn't mean you're a certain way or your partner is a certain way because he didn't hit it or he didn't receive it, right? It could just be the way, you guys are playing the game. Maybe that's another way I could start saying it, right? It's how you guys are playing the game. So I want you to think of that other aspect where it's not necessarily one of you, or maybe it's the lack of skills that make you hit it the wrong direction and not so much a reflection of who you are as a person. And this also relates to when it comes to narcissism and being with a narcissist. I'm a true believer, and one of the reasons I'm a true believer is because when things were rocky in my own relationship, when I started to learn how to play better ping pong, I started noticing that there were a lot less narcissistic tendencies showing up. There were a lot less narcissistic traits. And when I learned how to play ping pong and fix the dynamic in my relationship and learn the proper skills, I wasn't just trying to play ping pong. Well, that's what I did for many years, actually. I was trying to figure out how to play ping pong without any instruction, without any guidance, without any coaching. And the ping pong ball was going all over the place, right? And the relationship and the game we were playing wasn't so fun anymore. And we were getting frustrated at each other. And some of it definitely looked like narcissism. Think about if you've ever been in a situation where you've dated a guy and with you, he looked like a total narcissist, a total jerk. And then he went off and he found someone else, right? Maybe you guys weren't right for the relationship, of course. Maybe he's eventually going to show his true colors to that next person. But consider that sometimes it can be the dynamic too. And that's why someone can go into another relationship and be like, oh, this is wonderful. And they seem like a different person. So I'm really harping on this because I want you to consider that you two, you and your partner as a couple, you guys are much more than just two individual people and how you guys interact individually, right? There's that synergy that's formed between the two of you that's just beyond just who you are as a person, who he is as a person, how you're acting as a person, how he's acting as a person too. There's this extra element that gets created. That's why, in my opinion, the most effective way to spot a narcissist is to look beyond the behavior and to really start identifying and evaluating if he's a true narcissist after you've changed how you show up in the relationship. And what I mean by that is after you've really started working on and mastering the relationship skills that you need to be in a happy, lasting relationship. So I won't go into detail in terms of what I mean by all these individual relationship skills. In a nutshell, we're looking at communication skills, conflict management skills, negotiation skills, emotional mastery, and also understanding men, understanding what your partner needs in the relationship. So having said all that, I'm going to share with you a few different traits that might look like narcissism, but in fact might be the result of the ping pong game you guys are playing together. It might just be the dynamic in your relationship. And I'm so glad I explored this because I would be missing out on the wonderful relationship that I'm in now. And those narcissistic tendencies, lucky for me and maybe lucky for you, were just the product of the way that we were interacting and the lack of our skills together as a couple. The first one I'm going to mention can be super triggering, so be warned. If he appears self-centered, it might be that his needs aren't getting met. And I say this can be triggering because if you feel like you're doing everything for him, you're taking care of everything. You're doing more house chores. You're the one taking care of the kids more than he is. Maybe you're even doing all that and providing financially. It might be an insult, right? To be told that, hey, like he's not getting his needs met. But one of the really important things I want you to consider here is us doing things for our partner, just doing everything and sacrificing ourselves does not mean that is what our partner needs. And that was a huge aha moment for myself in my own relationship. Like I do less now than what I was trying to do when our relationship was like rock bottom and my boyfriend at the time kind of seemed like he was narcissistic, right? I do so much less now. And his needs, I can confidently say, are much better met now than they were before when I was sacrificing myself and doing everything to try to save my relationship. So my best piece of advice for this is for you to stop just doing everything and just really work on getting to the bottom of what it is that he truly needs. Number two, if you find that he's really defensive, I invite you to explore how are you communicating what you need? Is there any blame or shame in the way that you're conveying what it is that you desire or need from him? Now, obviously, you don't want to be in a relationship where you're like walking on eggshells all the time, making sure you've asked something the proper way. Just keep in mind that usually when you're at the rock bottom stage in your relationship, everything's going to be extra sensitive. And yeah, maybe for a while you need to pay extra attention to how you say things, but over time, you're going to get a lot more grace and flexibility in terms of how you ask. And actually, the more you practice communicating your needs effectively, the less you'll fall back on old habits of conveying what you need or communicating what you need with any type of guilt or shame or blame kind of implied in it. So number three, and this is a big one when it comes to narcissism, is the whole idea of devaluing. And for this, I really encourage you and really invite you to look at what you mean or what you're seeing as devaluing, because this could also be related or it could be the same thing as contempt. And to read more, I invite you actually, if you want to know more about contempt, I'll do maybe another video on this. I highly encourage you to Google The Four Horsemen from John Gottman, where he talks about the four horsemen that lead to divorce, right? This contempt could be a stage or a symptom of things that aren't going right in your marriage or things that can be improved. And that contempt could seem like devaluing you, because that at that stage in where things are going wrong, research has shown that it gets to a point where the other person, you start thinking less of your partner. Or in this case, if we're talking about the man is going to view you as less than. All right, another one could be that it looks like your partner is not being a team player. And in this case, what could be happening is that he could have an avoidant attachment style. So when things weren't going so good in my own relationship with my now husband and then boyfriend, I could feel him really distancing himself. And I realized that what was happening was, as we were playing this game of ping pong, he was starting to use deactivating strategies. This turned out to be avoidant attachment, tended to be his attachment style that was getting triggered. So it looked like he was kind of doing his own thing, not as committed, not as invested. And turns out it wasn't because he was a narcissist, it was just his attachment style that was being activated by the dynamic in our relationship. So you'll really want to learn techniques on how to deal with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, or find yourself a new partner who has a secure attachment style. The choice is always going to be yours. All right, gaslighting. Gaslighting is a big one. And I would say gaslighting could be misinterpreted for defensiveness. And we've already talked about defensiveness, so I would invite you to really explore it from that perspective also. Is he really gaslighting, or is he defensive and just trying to do anything he can to kind of save his ego and protect himself? And you know what? Even like healthy people have egos. At the end of the day, we're all super sensitive to our egos. I know a lot of us are on a spiritual, enlightened journey to try to detach from that ego, but at the end of the day, most of us are still going to be very sensitive to that. So the more you can practice skills to not trigger someone's guilt or shame or blame detector, the less you're going to find that they're defensive or gaslighting you. Love bombing. Love bombing. I love talking about love bombing. This one I find is also a term that can be, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. Obviously, in this case, we likely see love bombing as a bad thing. One of the things to really keep in mind in terms of love bombing is that oftentimes, if things were going really good at the beginning and all of a sudden things aren't so good and you're like, why is he not as romantic? Why isn't he doing these grand gestures anymore? Sure, he could be love bombing you in the negative sense of the word, or it could be the result, again, of the dynamic in your relationship. It could be that at first you guys are in the honeymoon phase, everything is lovely, everything is easy, and then life's challenges come in the way and you guys struggle because maybe you don't have the relationship skills or the level of relationship skills that you need, and then you start struggling. And then that's when it could be, again, kind of as a defense mechanism, a natural reaction to what's going on to the relationship, but your partner kind of withdraws more of that love or is less motivated or enticed to do the same level of love bombing as the beginning. So I experienced this for myself at the beginning of the relationship with my husband, then boyfriend. It was like a wild whirlwind romance. And then when things started getting really shaky in the relationship, there was less love bombing happening. But once we started working through it, the love bombing came back. And I actually share love bombing as an important tool to keep the spark going, to keep the flame going in your relationship. So it can come back. It's not necessarily a manipulative tool. If there's any kind of emotional abuse, name calling, that sort of stuff, again, it could be anger or frustration with what's going on in the relationship, or it could also be protest behaviors. So if you're familiar with attachment style, this can happen when one of the partners isn't getting what they need, and that's kind of how they act out. That's how they express, obviously in an unhealthy way, because they don't have the skills to express it. But again, it might not necessarily be the result of narcissism, but a lack of skills and just their natural attachment style. Now, I'm not saying you should tolerate this at all. This is actually where I draw the line in relationships in terms of taking radical responsibility for what's going on. Lastly, if it feels like he needs power, it may be that you are letting yourself be in the victim mode, and that is not your fault. That is, again, the result of the dynamic between the two of you. And I really, really encourage you to start looking at your own empowerment, like I was just talking about. Do not let yourself be in a situation where there is a hierarchy or roles that are uneven. The first step is to really remove that label, remove any kind of perception of this hierarchy, and start taking your power back. Now, obviously, this is all easier said than done, but definitely in my case, and in the case of many women I've worked with, that doing this work is very worth it. At or worse, I could have easily discarded my husband, or he could have reverse discarded me in the situation if he had actually been a narcissist. But in my case, using these points and these things to look for that I just shared with you helped me determine that, in fact, he was not one, and I would have lost so much. So thank you so much for watching this potentially triggering video. I hope this alternative point of view at least left you with some good insights to consider and maybe kind of gave you some sort of aha moment or even next steps in terms of what you need to do to deal with the situation or maybe get out of it, right? I am not a proponent of forcing you to stay in a relationship you don't want to be in. And if you know my story, I left my first marriage and then my second relationship after. I did everything I can to save it. If you'd like some more information on the 3 steps that I actually use to turn things around in my love life, I will link to it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.